Hey y'all, it's Miss Brett again, and today we are actually going to be finishing up Unit 1. We are going to finally get to 1607 and find out why that date is so important. So with this last block, this is block 3 of Unit 1, we are going to focus primarily on England and why England was kind of late into the game of exploration in the New World. So last class we talked primarily about the Spanish and how the Spanish with Christopher Columbus pretty much settled the entire Western Hemisphere. I mean, they expanded all the way up into areas like current day Colorado, all the way down into South America, and pretty much took over the Western Hemisphere and as well got really, really wealthy. So England, while we did have English settlers or English explorers come into the New World, it took almost 100 years for the English to actually have settlement. So remember, Columbus came into the New World in 1492. We're not going to see the English actually have a permanent settlement until 1607. So today we're going to talk about why. Why were the English so late in the game? Why did it take England so long to basically get to the New World? And we're going to focus on the religious and economic and political factors that caused the delay for England. So, with that being said, we're going to focus on religion or the social factors for England. With that being said, one of the primary issues with England is going to be the fact that their religious institutions are going to go through some dramatic changes. So, for one, we have to kind of go back to world history and review the Protestant Reformation. Now, the Protestant Reformation happened in 1517 because of this man over here. Hopefully, you remember who this guy is. This is Martin Luther. Now, Martin Luther was Catholic, and he ended up having some issues with the Catholic Church. You may remember that term from world history called indulgences. Basically, the Catholic Church was implying that if you bought these indulgences, you were paying your way into heaven. Now, Martin Luther had a lot of other basically issues with the Catholic Church, but that was kind of one of the big ones. He believed that people work their way to heaven based off of their practices, their daily actions. It wasn't about how much money you had. So he ended up posting his 95 Theses, which he ended up posting on the door of the Catholic Church. And the door of the Catholic Church was basically like, that's where news was. That was like a bulletin board where people got communication. But when he posted this, it caused a lot of discussion when in Germany, and it spread throughout Europe, and basically a demand for change, a demand for reform was made in the Catholic Church. Now, what ended up happening, though, not only was it a demand for reform, it ended up actually causing a break in the Christian religion, and the Protestant denomination ends up coming out of it. So we're going to look at a diagram here in a second to see how the Protestant Reformation is going to cause the Christian religion to be broken into two, Catholic and Protestant. Okay, now a little interesting fact, Martin Luther never intended for that to happen. Martin Luther actually died a Catholic, while a denomination is going to come out from his name called Lutheran. So just a little interesting fact that Luther never intended for a new denomination to break off, but it did end up becoming a result of the Protestant Reformation. So this is going to cause some issues for England. So let's go to the Church of England and talk about how this affects the Church of England. Well, the Church of England was always loyal to Catholicism. I mean, the Church of England was Catholic. They were the Christian church. The Church of England is the Church of England. You are part of that church in England. And so with this Church of England, loyal to the Pope, Catholic, we ended up seeing a major change in the Church of England because of this man here, who was the king, King Henry VIII. Now, King Henry VIII, he wanted to basically make sure he had a dynasty. He wanted to make sure he had a son, an heir to his throne. Now, with that being said, when he got married and were having kids, his first kids were daughters. And in 1536, he asked the Pope for a divorce. He wanted to remarry because he blamed his wife for not producing a son. Now, today we know that it's actually the man who has more control over if it's a boy or a girl. It's the male that ends up creating that gender. But with this time period, King Henry VIII blamed his wife. Now, the Pope did not grant King Henry VIII a divorce. He said no. And when this happened, King Henry VIII split from the Catholic Church. He ended up basically taking control over the Church of England, kicking the Pope out of authority in England, and he ended up becoming the head of the Church of England, which also gets called the Anglican Church. Now, when this was done, when this happened, the Anglican Church or the Church of England started to have more Protestant doctrines, which is going to cause England to go through kind of this like time of limbo of which way they fall, Catholic or Protestant. So with the big impact of the Protestant Reformation in England, we end up seeing major battles between the Catholics and the Protestants. The Catholics and the Protestants are basically both trying to control the Church of England. Both are trying to take over the Church of England and keep that doctrine in power. So we end up seeing these battles taking place, these issues between the Protestant side, the Catholic side, and it did get ugly. We definitely are going to see that this division in England is going to actually lead to major conflict. So with that being said, when an English monarch was in power, he may lean more towards the Catholic side. And then the Protestants were persecuted. But then when the next king came into power, he might lean more towards the other side. And it kind of created this division in the country. So England was having to focus more on themselves rather than thinking about exploration. We also saw a major rivalry with Spain, okay? Because the Church of England broke off from the Pope, broke off from the Catholic Church, Spain is going to now be a rival to England. You know, Spain is very close geographically, and Spain is predominantly Catholic. So this religious break from Catholicism is now going to cause Spain to have rivalry with England. We will see this rivalry intensify. We're going to definitely see it get actually into a conflict, but it's going to cause this issue because if England wants to go to the New World where Spain is in control, basically, we're going to see some of that tension develop, and it roots back to the Church of England breaking from Catholicism. We also see in England periods of persecution, actual discrimination, violence towards certain denominations in England. Now, what ends up happening with the Protestant Reformation is we end up actually having a lot of denominations break off from the Protestants. So this man here is John Calvin. And John Calvin basically believed in a doctrine that he called predestination. The doctrine predestination basically emphasizes that God has picked who is going to heaven. And God has already chosen who was saved. And basically, this group of people from John Calvin end up getting nicknamed or getting their name the Puritans. They used that name Puritan because they wanted to purify the Church of England. Now, the Puritans were always looking for signs that they were chosen. They were always looking for signs that they were saved. And so with these Puritans, they were definitely persecuted because people did not think that that was how you made it to heaven. That definitely was by your practice, your daily actions, your church attendance, your reading of the Bible. And so John Calvin definitely gets very targeted as well with the Puritans. So I want to take a second to let's break down what happened in England. And we're going to look at a chart. It might be helpful to make this chart in your notes. So we are going to add to it so that we know exactly where we are when we're looking at the Christian religion that is going to be coming over from the English settlements. So with Christianity, Christianity was always Catholicism until the Protestant Reformation. When the Protestant Reformation happened, Christianity broke into two branches. We have Protestant and we have Catholic. Both are Christian, okay? Then when King Henry VIII came along, he turned the Church of England into the Anglican Church, and he leaned more towards the Protestant doctrine. But every time the monarchy changed and the monarch controlled the Church of England, the Church of England was like on this beam of like this line of where are we, right? Like a monarch would come in and be more Catholic. Then a monarch came in and was more Protestant, and it kept going back and forth. So the Church of England is kind of this mixture of Catholic and Protestant doctrines. So it's going to cause some confusion. It's definitely going to cause persecution when another monarch comes in and kind of switches sides. But like I said, the Protestant denomination is going to break into so many different groups. We're going to have Lutherans, we're going to have Anglicans, we're going to have these groups, and one of those groups was the Puritans. So again, the Puritans wanted to purify the Church of England, get rid of all the Catholic stuff, and make the Church of England pure Protestant, okay? And because of their doctrine of predestination, they faced some severe persecution in England. So the major social reason that England was late to the New World is because they had this division. Their Church of England, their religious institution, was unclear. It was having battles, it was having issues, it was having tensions. Next, we're going to talk about the economic needs to basically go to the New World. What were the economic issues that were happening that were going to cause England's eventual settlement into the New World? Well, one of the big issues with England is the fact that it's an island, right? And when you have an island, you don't have as much land, you don't have as many resources, you basically have a lack of these needs that we're going to see become an issue. Now, in the 1400s and 1500s, England's population is booming, right? It's recovering from the Black Plague. We're seeing that the actual population is causing land shortages on the island. So when your population is growing, your land is declining, you're looking elsewhere for land. So some of the issues that caused the need to find more land, one was the enclosure movement. The enclosure movement was causing farmlands to change into basically land for sheep grazing. At this time, the demand for wool, for sheep wool, was so high because it was creating clothes, it was creating textiles. And farmers found it more profitable to graze sheep than to grow food. But if your population's on the rise and you don't have enough food, you're going to need to find farmland. So enclosure movement, we're seeing a decline of crops, of food, okay? The second reason we see land shortages and a need for more land are because of England's laws of primogeniture. Laws of primogeniture are basically saying that the oldest son inherits everything. Okay, laws of primogeniture. The oldest son inherits everything. Women could not inherit. Okay, if you're the second born son, sorry, you don't get anything. So the firstborn sons, the wealth, the land was owned by just a select few of people in England. So second and third born sons are going to be looking elsewhere for land and looking for ways to make money and produce, and that's going to drive desires to go settle in the New World. Now, one word that we definitely have to know for this unit that is basically the one of the big economic themes that's going to last throughout the unit 2 and 3 is mercantilism. You should recognize that word from world history. Mercantilism is this idea, this concept to basically make a country rich. The whole purpose of mercantilism is to build wealth, become wealthy. Now, with mercantilism, it basically has a few steps that we see here on this diagram. So the mother country, in this case, we're going to say England, okay? There are other mother countries like Spain and France. The mother country, England, is going to basically try and find resources. So step one, the mother country is going to find resources. And they're primarily going to find resources in other land, okay? So with exploration, as the mother country is exploring, finding land, taking land, they're also taking their resources. So the reason for this, okay, the mother country is taking the resources, literally claiming ownership. The whole purpose for that is so that the mother country ends up having more exports than imports. Okay, the mother country is now going to have more resources to sell, to export, to make money on. They don't have to import as much. They don't need to buy as much because they are getting the resources from their colonies, from the land that they took. So when you are exporting more than you are importing, you're selling more than you are buying, you are making money, you are making profit, and that mother country is getting rich. Now, when this happens, though, the mother country owns all of the resources from the colonies. So look at the end of this diagram. What the mother country is going to do is take all the resources, right? The colonies don't get to keep anything. The colonies don't get to sell their own stuff. The colonies have to give all of their resources, all of their materials to the mother country. So food and gold and silver is all going back to the mother country. And then the mother country is going to sell those goods back to the colonies and to other countries. So when the mother country takes everything, you don't get to claim any of it as a colony and then sells it back to you, right? Not only are you not being able to produce your own wealth, you're now having to buy the stuff that you produced. This is going to cause the mother country to get super, super, super rich, okay? So mother country takes all the resources. Mother country is selling so much, way more than they're having to buy. And the mother country is selling back those goods to its own colonies. So if you're in a colony and you're producing potatoes, you have to give all of your crop to the mother country. And then the mother country is going to sell it back to you for a much higher price. Okay? This, at the beginning, no one had a problem with. Everyone listened to the monarch. Everyone listened to the king and queen. Eventually, this is going to cause some resentment. So the last economic component of England's desires for expansion comes with joint stock companies. You may want to put in parentheses, joint stock companies are also known as charter companies. And charter companies or joint stock companies were basically how voyages were made to the New World. So what a joint stock company is, or a charter company, is basically a group of investors. Okay, it's a group of investors. Getting to the New World is expensive. Getting to the New World takes money, takes voyages, takes resources, takes people. It's expensive. And it's hard to pay for the voyages. So a group of investors would basically pull their money together and finance an expedition. The reason they're nicknamed charter companies is because this company would then get a charter from the crown. The crown basically had to give you permission to go settle in the New World under the crown's name. So these charter companies, basically the whole purpose of this is I'm going to I'm going to put in a few dollars, I'm going to put in a few money and invest in it. But then the people who pulled all their money together get a profit. Whatever profit is coming out of this company, whatever they're collecting or finding or growing, those investors are going to get a profit. Now, this was difficult. This is going to be pretty hard. Most of these charter companies are actually going to result in failure because it's a huge, huge burden, an economic burden. You're having to take a risk. You're giving your money to someone and you're hoping you get something in return. And that wasn't always the case. But joint stock companies are going to be the first way that England starts to get to the New World. So let's finish with the economic motives, okay? The economic motives that are going to end up driving England into the New World. For one, we are going to get a new queen in 1558. And in 1558, Queen Elizabeth, also known as the Virgin Queen, comes to power. In 1558, when Queen Elizabeth came to power, she really helped produce a national identity for England. In 1588, Queen Elizabeth came to power and really caused the national identity to move very strongly to Protestantism. The Church of England is going to very much so go to the Protestant side. And basically, Queen Elizabeth hated Catholics. She is going to denounce them. She is going to persecute Catholics. And she is going to cause England to really, from here on out, be more on the Protestant side in the Church of England. Now, with this national identity, the fact that she hates Catholics is going to also cause her to hate Spain. Spain is a Catholic country, and she wanted to challenge Spain. It bugged her that Spain was making so much money. They had so much gold coming in from the New World. They were the wealthiest country in the world, the most powerful country in the world, and she hated that. So she's going to challenge Spain. And she actually encouraged English buccaneers and voyagers and warriors to go out and actually basically board Spanish ships. She told them to seize Spanish resources. So imagine like going like you're this small little island, right? And you're actually picking on the most powerful country in the world. She had this happening and they were taking gold, they were stealing from the Spanish. And eventually, what's Spain going to do, right? They're going to fight back. And so eventually, Spain did fight back. And this ends up becoming known as the Spanish Armada. Spain is going to unleash a huge fleet of about 130 ships, massive fleet for this time, and send it all to England. Basically, Spain is going to invade England to return England back to Catholicism and take back everything that was stolen. So when the Spanish Armada is unleashed and they're crossing into the English Channel, they're going to surround, they're going to invade, they're going to basically crush England. Now, at this time, everybody had their money on Spain. I bet everyone in England had their money on Spain. No one ever would think that someone could defeat the Spanish Armada, but the English did. Now, in hindsight, honestly, what really defeated the Spanish Armada was a massive storm that caused so many boats to sink. But Queen Elizabeth is going to claim that it was their God that saved them. She even said, God breathed and they were scattered. She believes that it was God's doing that caused the storm that defeated the Catholic Spanish. And now that the English defeated the Spanish, if the English go to the New World and butt heads with the Spanish, English aren't scared anymore. The English aren't afraid of the Spanish anymore. This is going to create a huge surge of nationalism that is now going to allow the English to feel confident to go to the New World and not be threatened by Spain. So, where do the English start? the English start with Roanoke. This is Sir Walter Raleigh. Sir Walter Raleigh was basically granted permission to go to the New World. Now, when he got to the New World, he ended up naming this territory Virginia after the Queen, right? The Virgin Queen. And when Sir Walter Raleigh got there, he basically was off the coast of like North Carolina. The environment was humid and swampy. There was a lot of tension with natives and local natives that were right there. They ended up going, and it ends up becoming a complete disaster. So there were actually missions where the settlers were going to go back, get more resources, get more stuff to come back and keep the colony going. But when they came back, when the voyage came back, no one was there. The English people disappeared. Now, there's a lot of theory of what the heck happened to Roanoke. How did they just disappear? Where did they go? And there's lots of theories that were out there. For one of the most popular theories at the time was the Native Americans killed them. The Native Americans were very, definitely there was tension, and Native Americans did not want the English there. So there was definitely the most popular theory, really, up until this time, was that the Native Americans killed them. However, more has developed, more has come about from Roanoke, and like especially this past year, there's actually been articles about Roanoke, because the only sign left of the English was on this tree that says Croatoans, which was the local natives in that region. So then there was suspicion, maybe the English like joined with the Croatoans, got help from the Croatoans, and just basically joined in with their tribe. And thanks to now the popularity of genetic testing, like Ancestry and 23andMe, there's actually more proof that this theory is accurate. But again, one of the struggles with studying history is that sometimes we just don't know. We have to make assumptions. We have to make our best educated guesses. And sometimes we don't really know the exact truth. So with the English, though, they will rebuild, they will come back together and reorganize, and eventually get their first permanent settlement, which is Jamestown in 1607. Now, Jamestown, which is again in Virginia, same area basically, same region, Jamestown in 1607 is going to be when King James takes over in the monarchy. And Jamestown was named after King James. And so Jamestown's going to start off just like Roanoke. Jamestown is going to have major struggles, but with some help, some organization, it's going to be the first settlement that stays permanent for the English. So Unit 1 ends with 1607 with the settlement of Jamestown, which we're going to go into detail next unit. But I want to end today with you analyzing this document and thinking about the economic, social, and political elements of this document. So this document, which if you look up at the top, the sources, was right after the defeat of the Spanish Armada, okay? And when the Spanish Armada was defeated, we definitely see, like I said, a rise of nationalism. We see the economic motives. We see the religious motives to promote Protestant religion. And we definitely are going to see a lot of the political motives for empire as well. So I'm going to have you in your questions look at this document. You're going to HIP the document, historical context, intended audience, the purpose, and the perspective or the point of view. And then I want you to kind of think about how this person who wrote this document, what is the biggest motive, do you think, to this author? Do you think it's more of an economic motive, a social motive, or a political motive? Okay, so this ends our Unit 1. And again, we'll have time to, go through this in class, and always ask questions when you have them.